This is the Extra Point Podcast. During this podcast, we will dive deeper into our Sunday teaching and share practical next steps for your faith journey. Now, let's kick off the Extra Point.
Hey, welcome to the Extra Point. I am Cheryl Ross, the Next Steps and Discipleship Pastor here at Southward Church, and I'm with Scott Beha, our lead pastor. And before we dive any deeper into Sunday's teaching, I want to make sure that if you haven't liked or subscribed to this podcast, that you go ahead and do so. That way you don't miss out on any new content. Well, this past Sunday, Pastor Scott, it was Easter, and so obviously there was resurrection involved, and there was all the things about Jesus. Yep. But one of the things that you kind of opened with was about, you used an illustration of life insurance policies and how it doesn't seem like it's applicable unless you are old or dead. Yeah. And so but in regards to that, sometimes people feel like Christianity is the same way. However, the premise of Christianity is actually immediately applicable to our lives, right?
Yes. Yeah, like I remember as a kid growing up, so a friend of mine actually that goes to this church now, whenever we were like college-age students, we both had this conversation. We were both raised in church, and we said we believe all of it and think that it would be a good part of our life, but we both said it'll just be something that we do later on in life after we've done everything that we want to do, and then we'll kind of go do that Christian thing later on. We both just were raised with this mindset that, like, yes, I believe the reason why the Easter crowd is so big in every church every year is because they too agree that the Christian message has something to offer them. But I don't know that they always understand, or that we always understand. I definitely didn't as a kid growing up in church, how immediately impactful Christianity is. Not just later on in life whenever we're getting ready to die, but like it has the ability to come right into the middle of our lives and things can actually be different. That was not obvious to me. And I'm not saying that my church growing up or the people in charge of me growing up didn't say that. It just wasn't immediately obvious to me because there was always so much talk about heaven and hell. And not enough talk about how you can experience heaven and hell right now as well. And like essentially whatever situation you find yourself living out right now, if you're experiencing heaven on earth, that is an experience that never ends. It may change locations for a little while, but it never ends. And living hell on earth is also an experience that never ends. And so we always talked about the ultimate version of those things. Like I remember every year at Vacation Bible School growing up, on that Wednesday night, every year the flannel graph would come out, and there'd be these flames and Jesus. And it's like, look, where do you want to spend forever at? And it was like, how many people do we try to have faith conversations with, and we walk up to them and we go, if you were to die tonight, where would you end up? Like, that's how people try to go do evangelism, because the church has made a mess of this. We're the ones that have made it all about the future. Right. It's like, oh, what happened? What's going to happen tonight if you die? What's going to happen and so people go like, well, the likelihood of me, let's say 25-year-old healthy young person dying tonight in my sleep is not very likely, and so I'm not really concerned with what happens to me when I die. It feels, again, I said it on Sunday, when I was in 9th grade, I knew I was doing nothing in life that had to do with math or science. I knew it already. My 10th grade honors science teacher told me that she would give me a passing grade if I promised to never take another science class, because I had caused so many problems in that class. I knew by 9th grade when I was sitting in geometry class, I'm never using this, ever. I have to learn this right now and pretend like it's somehow applicable to my life. It took me all these years to kind of put these words together. This is how I felt about Christianity. Yeah. Other than the fact that I was just very strong-willed and wanted to have my own way and wanted to do all the stuff that they told me I wasn't allowed to do, this was the other aspect of it, was what I wanted to do seemed very immediate, and what God wanted me to do seemed very far off. Like it was like, well, this is what happens when you die, and you need to deal with that when you're 8 years old. And you go, I mean, it just doesn't seem readily applicable to me. So it was hard for me to take serious. And that's, again, I'm not saying the failure of the church that I grew up in, because those were really great people that had really good intentions. I'm saying just the failure of church in general to not help people understand that Christianity has something to offer them right now.
Yeah.
I actually had someone in our church who had been in much older than me, been in church decades longer than me, said I was the first person. This didn't happen this past weekend, but I've been talking like this since I started preaching. I was the first person in decades and decades and decades of being in the church that ever told her that Christianity had something to offer her right now and not just at the end of her life. Because there's so many people that are just holding on to, well, yes, God does have something for me at the end of my life, and what I'll do is I'll just grin and bear it and try to make it to the end, and then I'll reap my reward. And I go, that is a version of Christianity that is not appealing to anyone, and it's not even the true version, that you're just supposed to try to make it through life. Like I had someone recently ask me, he said, he said, I believe in Jesus, I love Jesus, but it feels to me like he's right now just wants me to sit here and suffer until I die, and then he has something for me. And I was like, no, this is not how God operates.
Yeah.
God did through Jesus what he did to usher in the new creation. Because the church's theology on new creation is so weak, that's why we have a forward-focused, everything's out into the future, not readily applicable to my life. Because the way, and then what the church does, the way the church tries to make it readily applicable to my life is, especially in the Wesleyan holiness movements that we roll around in, the way it becomes immediately applicable in those circles is, if you want that thing that's at the end of your life, you better be good right now. You better get your crap together right now and make sure that you got, if not, you ain't going to get what's at the end of this rainbow, period. And that's how they try to make it immediate. Yeah, oh, no, Jesus has something for you right now, and it's you better be good or else. But don't worry, when you get there, it's going to be really good. That's just a different version of sit down, shut up, and suffer until eternity. And this is not the message of Christianity whatsoever. It's also the opposite end of our Wesleyan holiness tradition is any form of, well, yeah, I mean, God has something for you at the end of your life, and it doesn't really matter what you do until you get there. As long as you accept it, said that prayer, you're going to make it. And you go, no. There's a more immediate thing that is available to both of those extremes that is so much more helpful. And both of those are, first off, not gospel-centered, not gospel truth whatsoever. And they're not good news for the person in the moment that's going through something really difficult. Like, what does, and again, I said on Sunday, like church answers. Church answers are things that are generally true but generally unhelpful. Like, how does telling a mom and a dad who just lost their child that they will see him again someday, how is that immediately helpful to them? It's not at all. That's silliness. How about you tell them that God understands your pain, and because he has ushered in the new creation, it will not always be like that. And though it will not make everything better, you can get a taste of that right now through the resurrection power of Jesus coming and invading your life when you invite him in, and that he will not take all the pain away, but you can experience his transformative love in the midst of your grief and sorrow, because we knew that in the midst of his grief and sorrow is what brought about ultimate joy in that moment. That's different than, hey, just you'll see him again someday. No, there is resurrection power now available for you to not just make it through, but to get through and to strive through and to thrive through whatever it is that you are having to face. And so that's why if we would change the conversation in the church from merely being on what happens when we die, which oddly enough is not the focus of the scriptures either. So how the church ever got there is so mind-blowing to me.
Mm-hmm.
There's clearly things in the scriptures about what happens to you when you die.
Mm-hmm.
It is not the vast majority of what we see whatsoever. Like, so much has to do with here and now,
Mm-hmm.
right now, how God wants to do something in your life right now.
Mm-hmm.
It's so weird to me how we ever got this forward-focused version that removes the reward all the way to, or pushes the reward all the way to the end, and goes, well, just make sure that you follow the rules good enough to make sure that you get there at the end. You're like, it's just it's a very unhelpful way of taking the most beautiful story that's ever been told and making it really mundane to people, to the point where they go, you know what? It may be true what you're saying, but I'll take my 70 years of doing whatever I want, because that feels more immediately applicable to my life than your threats of where I'm going to spend eternity.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, you use this timeline to kind of show from creation to Jesus, the way that we can view the great resurrection, and how you talked a little bit about the Jewish mindset of the great resurrection, and how this is the basis of the great Christian hope.
Yes.
But often it's misinterpreted a lot.
Yeah.
How can we interpret this in the right way and make sure that we are putting this as our hope?
I so badly wish I could get my colleagues in ministry, and there's some out there.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just saying, by and large, I wish I could get my colleagues in ministry to get this point and to change the way that they teach because of it. And that's, if you are teaching the great hope of the Christian faith in a way that does not echo the great hope of the Jewish people, you are teaching a divergent version of that future, which is why it's not applicable in the now. That's what's going on. So what like the great Jewish hope, and this what the timeline that we walk people through, let's say the beginning of time, Genesis 1:1, God created the heavens and the earth, and then they're all throughout Israel's history, they kept getting these promises and these prophecies and predictions of a renewed creation where God would come to dwell with his people. That was always the great Jewish hope. And that when God comes to dwell with his people, he will resurrect the dead, as Daniel 12:2, some to everlasting life, some to eternal disaster. That's the great Jewish hope. But their hope lied in that God would come and dwell in the midst of a renewed creation. And somehow, the basis of most Christian teaching right now is how God is going to destroy the creation and take you to a place called heaven that is a spiritual reality which is not present in the forms that we try to teach it in the church today anywhere in the Old Testament. So therefore you end up with this eternal state of we're going to spend forever with Jesus in heaven. And then we start saying really goofy things, and Building 429 writes songs about how this is not our home. We're just passing through, and like all of Southern gospel is like predicated on this world is not our home. It's like, go back and read the Old Testament. Stop treating the Old Testament like it's your stepchild that has no business in your home. The basis of the whole thing is that humanity was made for creation. It's right there in Genesis 1 and 2. This is the place God designed us for, not for a spiritual reality called heaven. And even within our own tribe, I cannot hardly get traction when I say stuff like this. Even though people agree with me, it would cost us way too much to change our terminology and re-educate our people than it would just be simple enough to go like, do you want to go to heaven when you die? and just letting it sit and be like, that's fine, let's do that. And then we sing hymns about it, and it reinforces this bad teaching. And again, when the only thing that you have to offer people is, do you want to go to heaven when you die? Most people look at you and go, I don't understand what that has to do with right now. And so if the great Jewish hope was a renewed creation with God in its center, and the resurrected people, some to eternal life and some to eternal devastation, that is also the great Christian hope. That is the story that Jesus showed up and continued. He didn't change it. Nowhere in Jesus' teachings do you come across this place. He goes, I know the Jews thought that there would be this renewed creation and that God would one day come and dwell in the midst of his people. But we changed the plan. We're just going to suck all y'all up out of here and take you to a spiritual reality called heaven for the rest of your life. And don't worry, this world was never meant to be your home. You're just passing through. Where do we get that in the New Testament or the Old Testament? The answer is you absolutely do not, unless you don't know how to interpret the Bible. And if you're just passing on what someone passed on to you without, where's the scriptural evidence for it? And I know everyone wants to go to Jesus, some of Jesus' last words. In my Father's house there are many mansions. If it were not so, I've gone to prepare a place for you. And they go, see, he's talking about he's going off to prepare heaven. No, heaven, as far as the scriptures are concerned, in both the Old Testament and the New Testament, is simply the place where God's at. It's not what we've made it out to be. This like, Jesus had to leave because he had to go get his house ready. It's craziness to think through it like that. No, in fact, that word that everyone goes, I'm going to get me a mansion. I'm going to get me a mansion. That word mansion is actually the Greek word mone, which is a room, like it would mean like a short stay room, a place where you are meant to dwell temporarily, but not forever. So even if we understood the original Greek, we would understand Jesus is not saying, I'm going to prepare a place for you where we're going to stay forever whatsoever. He's saying where he's going, that will be the temporary place where people are held. But again, that is foundational in the Jewish thought processes as well. They called it Abraham's bosom. There was some temporary holding place for those who were the faithful of God and those that were not the faithful of God. It was a temporary thing because full final consummation had not come yet. Right. And so, again, even all of that is found in Jewish thought in the Old Testament, which, again, is carried on into the New Testament. This is why when Jesus tells the story, granted, it's a parable, so we don't press it for literalism, of the rich man and Lazarus, he says that these two people are in a reality where they're not too far away from one another, and it's clearly some sort of holding area, and he refers to it as Abraham's bosom because it's not final consummation yet. Yeah. And so if we would change our language around not just that, we're going to spend eternity in heaven, that's not true unless you mean the new heavens and the new earth when you say heaven, but you should be much more clear when you talk about that. Yeah. The reason why, and I'm a stickler for this, that language matters, because if you tell the average person on the street that's only heard bits and pieces of the Christian story, if you use the word heaven, they're going to equate it to this place up in the sky. Like, I just had dinner with someone this past weekend that was asking about, like, how much of the Christian stuff do I really have to believe? Because, like, am I really supposed to believe that heaven's just someplace up in the sky when we know scientifically that's not even possible? And I go, no, you don't have to believe that. That's not even true. That's not even how the Bible portrays it. But again, because we're lazy in the way that we present the truth of the Scriptures and won't just change the way that we talk, we've made unnecessary hoops for people to have to jump through where they think that we have to be the most ignorant people on the face of the earth because they're thinking that we think that heaven's up in the sky somewhere, and if we could just get one of Elon or Amazon's rockets to go high enough, we might actually make it there. Yeah. None of us think that. None of us are, but we say that stuff with, sorry, I almost said crap again, with our words, and it confuses people and becomes unnecessary hurdles that people have to jump over. Well, that's not what we're saying. Like, so if you're saying heaven, I would say the new heavens and the new earth. This is clearly what Revelation 21 teaches is going to be the ultimate destination of the Christian, and that's ultimately what it's been since Genesis 1. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. That's what he created there. He created the heavens and the earth, a heaven and earth place being a temple where he could be with his creation. So what's happening in Revelation 21, I do not understand how in the world we got to this Gnostic view of, well, we're going to be off in some spiritual reality called heaven. It makes no sense that the church adopted a heretical view, and it's now the dominant view. And I'm the one that gets looked at weird whenever I bring this up in conversation with people. They're like, act like I'm the one saying something out of sorts. Now, why is this immediately applicable to what we were talking about? That the message of Christianity shouldn't just be pushed off into the future, but now. All of a sudden, if you start talking about the new heavens and the new earth, you start talking about new creation rather than one day you'll go to heaven when you die. Well, the other flip of that coin is, I said on Sunday, that God took what was supposed to happen at the end of the timeline and ushered it into the middle, which means now, all of a sudden, into our hopeless situations, resurrection has been made available. So we can pass from death to life and grab hold of resurrection power, which actually changes things in the present and not just in the future. It means that like whatever it is that you're going through, that now you have access to the very presence of God to change those situations, to see those situations be different, to see you be different, to watch yourself pass from life to death. So, and that's why it's immediately applicable, because if you knew how much trouble you were going to cause you if you didn't experience resurrection power, you would probably long for it and go, oh, I can't wait for the day when it'll be like that. No, it can be like that now because God took the ending point and put it into the middle and said it's available to you. And the one thing that I missed on Sunday that I wish I hadn't is the very next thing that right after that passage that we taught, Jesus looks at Mary and he says, do you believe this? And the way that all of it is unlocked is through faith. Yeah. Faith is what unlocks the power of resurrection in your life. Yeah. It's you start to deal with reality differently when you start to come at it through the lens of faith. Things begin to change in that moment. And so that's what the church is in need of, to marry all of this together and teach it in the proper way. All of a sudden, it's not just sit down, shut up, and suffer. And it's also not, you better be good or else you're going to miss out on the reward at the end of it. Right. It's now things can be different. Resurrection is available. Through the power of your faith unlocks this way of dealing with reality in a way that brings the presence of God to bear on everything as it currently is, but yet doesn't stay that way because the presence of God is in the process of changing it. And so that's how it becomes immediately applicable to people in their lives, because they go, oh, I don't have to sit here and wait for eternity to experience what God has already paid for me to have. It was like the story about the Uggs that I told everyone. It's like, Megan and I had already paid for my kids to have that, so there was no sense in us waiting to give it to them. Yeah. And that's what God did. God goes, I already paid for it, so you can go ahead and have it now. And I wish more people would grab a hold of that and live in that reality, because that is what is available to us.
Yeah, absolutely. So now, how do we take this knowledge and really apply it in our lives now to see some of that change and new creation happen?
Yeah. Well, here's what I would say is it's unlocked through faith, and the more that you interact with it, the larger it will become in your life, and then it will begin to touch every area of your life. When you start to live in the reality of the resurrection, all of a sudden you become a different person, and when you become a different person, the things around you begin to change. So maybe let's take one that we were just recently talking about in our Sunday morning services. Let's talk about marriage. Maybe your marriage is a disaster. About the time that you experience resurrection and your spouse experiences resurrection, the two of you begin to change more into the image of who you were made to be. All of a sudden, your marriage is now living in the resurrection power of Jesus, and it can now thrive rather than you being on the verge of killing each other. Yeah. You can actually experience, that's a real life example, right? Like if it's, okay, maybe you got a bad diagnosis at the doctor. okay, when you begin to invite Jesus into that situation, I'm not saying that he always heals, but he does sometimes. And so this ushers in the realm of possibility of healing into your life. And at the very least, through unlocking that with your faith, it at least changes your response to what's happening in your life and removes the hopelessness of it.
Yes.
And rather gives you hope in the midst of it. Whether God changes your circumstances or not, you can actually live with hope because you realize that because of the resurrection that was available to you now, I'm not waiting on being my eternal life. It's now. So whether the sickness gets the best of me or not, it's simply a change of location for a little while if I'm already living resurrection power. I might be living the rest of my first life here, and then but that walk with Jesus is not going to be interrupted. I'm going to end up right into his presence on the other side of death, where I will spend the rest of my eternity with him there until he comes again, and then we will reign and rule together in the new heavens and the new earth. And so even when it comes to sickness, when it comes to our financial situations, when it comes to our kids, all of a sudden you want to be a better parent for your kid, because that's ultimately, if you have a kid that is having some issues or whatnot, sometimes it takes the parents experiencing the resurrection power of Jesus in their lives before the kid can experience it. Because when the kid sees it happening in your life, it'll become attractive to them as well. And so, like, you can become a better parent through the resurrection power of Jesus when you go, okay, that's it. I'm pushing all my chips into the middle. I'm betting on through faith on Jesus that he can change this situation. That's when things begin to change. And it's when we try to take matters into our own hand, not live by faith, but try to live by our own sight, that we make a mess of things, and then we're having to ask God to come in and clean up after us.
Absolutely.
So those are, it's just applying the power of Jesus to the things that you're walking through.
Yeah.
And again, it doesn't make everything better.
Right.
This is not some sort of Pollyanna, like name it and claim it, like, oh, as long as I invite God into a situation, things will get better. Not necessarily. You might that disease still might get the best of you. You know what? That relationship might still be destined for doom. I don't know. I'm just saying you at least have the possibility of resurrection when Jesus is involved. Whereas when he's held at arm's length, and it's like, well, this is just what we do on Easter's. That way, just in case this whole thing is true, we'll be good at the end. You live the rest of your life missing out on what has been available to you the whole time.
Yeah, I think that is probably the biggest thing, is that you run the risk of missing out on what's really great and available for you right now. So I hope that you apply your faith and the resurrection power to your life. We'll be right here again next week with another extra point and some more practical next steps for your faith journey.
Thanks for tuning in to The Extra Point. Be sure to subscribe to the Southridge Church podcast and tune in every Wednesday for another episode of The Extra Point.